All right, guys, welcome to guest episode number one of Better Body Radio. So I'm joined today by Simon Mitchell. He is the owner of Iron Paradise Fitness. It's an online coaching business that helps individuals lose fat, build muscle whilst cutting through all the noise, confusion, and usual BS. Based in Rugby in England, he's also the owner of a top 20 fitness podcast called Muscle, Mindset and Meal Prep. I hope I got the order okay.
You have.
Close to 1 million downloads, I believe, at this stage, Simon.
Indeed, yeah. Kind of creeping on 900,000 at the moment.
There we go. So it's going strong. And I think he started that just around 2.5, 3 years ago. So as you can imagine, that's grown incredibly quick. He's also an MNU Certified Nutritionist and has studied the well-respected methods of RTS, which is known as the Resistance Training Specialist courses. Simon, anything to add to that? And welcome.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. You've done a sterling job of giving me a good build-up, so hopefully I can live up to expectations. But I think you covered pretty much the background as it is, the overview. So, nothing much to add at this stage. I'm sure we'll get into lots of detailed stuff about kind of what I do and all of that sort of good stuff over the course of the interview. So I'll leave it up to you to ask me a few questions and we'll go from there.
Excellent. And for you guys, if you can't tell from just looking at Simon's bookshelf behind him there, he's an avid Star Wars fan also.
Indeed. Gotta be. Bit of Star Wars, Lego never goes amiss.
Exactly. Thrown out there. Right. Well, let's dive into question number one, guess. So one of the reasons I wanted to get Simon on for a start was that he's been a long-time friend of both myself and my wife, Mal. Someone who we respect not only as a coach, but as a good person. Someone we met in Amsterdam around about 3 years back when we were kind of almost starting out our quest for figuring out whether we wanted to dive into the world of online coaching. And we've kind of watched Simon's growth over the last 3 years excel, and he's really kind of taken leaving the kind of corporate world into his stride. And as Simon will tell you, I'm sure it's came with its ups and downs, but I think the reason why I wanted to go down this kind of route for the first question is that I think a lot of listeners will either resonate with your story, or there's potentially people who eventually listen to this podcast who will maybe look back on this episode and think, well, actually, I'm that person who's avidly into my fitness. I know that that's more what I want to be doing with my time, but I don't know how to make that leap, or I'm scared to kind of leave the corporate world. So I guess my first question is, when did you kind of really have that, you know what, enough is enough, I'm all in type of moment? When was that for you?
Yeah, so as you kind of touched on, my life before fitness was in corporate business, and through various different jobs, I'd been probably about like 12, 13 years coming out of university. I spent some time working in gyms just coming out of university, but it was never really my career path or my planned career path. You know, I had it instilled in me that that's not necessarily a proper job, and you need to go get a corporate job in a office and do stuff like that. So I kind of did work in gyms in my early 20s and then kind of transitioned out of that into the corporate business world. And as you say, back in May 2018 was the time I decided to make the full shift from doing this as a side project to going all in full time. And the decision for that probably came 3 months prior to that actual leaving point, that actual transition. And I got to a point where I speak about this on a particular episode of my podcast where I talk about some sort of mental health issues that I'd had in terms of struggling with being really depressed in my job that I was doing at that time, feeling like I was at very much a low point. And a couple of things kind of collided together to make it all kind of say, well, this is going to be that moment. One of the things was I was sat in my chair in my office where I was working, and one of the guys behind me was a little bit older than me, but he had a process where every Friday he would count down the number of years, months, weeks, and days he had to retirement. He was just literally just ticking these days off as he went. And I thought that was a very depressing way to live your life. So I sat there and thought, well, how long have I got left? And it was about 30 years. And then I kind of had the realization is like, I don't want to be doing this for 30 years. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because someone else says this is what I should be doing. I don't have any passion for this. I don't have any passion for creating spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations about stuff that is meaningless to me. And then over the course of that weekend, I saw a post from Gary Vee, the social media guy. And he just said, basically the video was titled Enough. And he kind of was talking about, well, when is going to be that time where you say enough is enough and you're going to make a transition? And then I kind of saw that as a little bit of like stars aligning to say, okay, I've had this feeling. He says, is enough enough? And then I kind of made that decision. I went back in on the Monday and said, that's it, I'm done. Here's my 3 months notice and I'm disappearing. That period of time, my business wasn't actually making enough to pay my bills. So it was a case of, all right, I've decided to make this leap and now I've got to make it work. And I think that was a scary thing, but also it was probably the best thing that I could have done, because it's then instilled the work ethic to say, right, I've got to work damn hard now to get to the point where my savings don't run out and I can actually make this business a profitable business. So that was kind of the transition. I kind of, jumped ship in May 2018, but it was probably 3 months before that kind of that sea change moment came in my head to take the big leap.
Cool, because it's funny because I actually remember back when we met you in Amsterdam, which was 2017, was it? I think it was.
April 2017.
There you go. Those are the dates on point. And you were still obviously at your previous company, and you were still, I remember, for you were one of the people from that group we kept in touch with, and you were kind of toing and froing, and like I think from what I can remember, at least, it was a very not only a difficult decision, but it was a very well considered decision. You really put in. Anyone who gets to know you well will know that you're a very analytical person. You always do your due diligence, do the numbers, figure everything out. But I think it's really cool to see that initial struggle and that initial doubt and worry and fear all kind of culminate into what's obviously happened up to this day. So I think that's cool, and I commend you for making that leap, because a lot of people don't, like, they literally say they live in fear and they kind of almost just accept living a life not by their own design and just kind of doing things they don't like doing just because it either pays the bills or pleases someone else. So I think people underestimate how much, first of all, courage it takes, but I think they also underestimate just how rewarding it is if you do finally take that leap. And I think
and I think like the situation I was in at that time as well is that I was single. Well, still am. So I'm single. That's maybe an insight into what actually happens when you start to do it and you don't have any time for relationships. But anyway, so I was single, didn't have any sort of kids or anything like that. So in my own head, I thought, well, it's like now or never, because if I've got a family that depends on me, then I can't really take risks with their well-being and all that sort of stuff. So I said, well, if I take this leap now, well, actually, it's only my life that's going to go down south if it doesn't work. I'm not actually taking my entire family and their livelihood and things that they love and enjoy, and houses and stuff like that. If it all went terribly wrong, then I've not messed up that whole thing. So it kind of was one of those things where I guess there's never going to be the perfect moment where you've got this side business, if that's the way that people are going, and it's earning you exactly the same amount of money as you're earning in your other job, and you can just do an easy transfer over. It's never going to be that. There's always going to be that point where it feels like the right time, but there's still this big leap of faith. And I think that, like you mentioned, like when we first met back in 2017 in Amsterdam, I think that was the point where just kind of prior to that, it was a case of, right, now I'm going to take this seriously. And really, so before then, kind of just doing a few blogs here, the odd social media posts, wasn't really kind of thinking that this could turn into something. And then it was that sort of event that then kind of really focused me and said, right, okay, now I'm going to work to make this transition happen. I didn't know when, at that time, I didn't know when that transition would be, but it was okay, like, this is where I want to start focusing some attention now. So yeah, it's been a difficult time, and there's lots of difficult decisions to make, and there's times where you strip back all of the things that you love and enjoy, and you've become almost sort of accustomed to, like, I didn't have a car for a couple of years and stuff like that. So all those little creature comforts that you're used to, you kind of give those up to focus in on something. But I think if you've got like the desire and the drive to do it, then, you know, the consistency that you then show up with shows your level of commitment, you know. And I think that once you do that for long enough, it all starts to pay off. And yeah, that's kind of how I've meandered through, I'd say.
Meandered, great way to describe it. That actually segues really nicely onto the next question. It's a bit of a broad one, so I'm very interested to see what your answer is.
All right.
What gets you out of bed every morning? What makes you do what you do?
Okay, so I guess when, you know, people often talk about like your why and stuff like that. So I have a few different whys. One is that I always remind myself what I felt like when I was in that corporate job. So I talk about, again, like in that podcast episode that I spoke about earlier, is that I would literally go to the gym in the morning and then get in my car and drive to work. And instantly that journey, I was get ever closer to the building that I worked at. I was getting ever more depressed. And it was kind of like, I just don't want to go back to that feeling. And therefore, for me, that's what drives me. So I don't want to go back to how I used to feel. How I feel right now is how I want to live the rest of my life. So I need to keep my foot on the gas with doing the right things, showing up every day, whether I want to or not, whether I feel motivated or not. Then that's what keeps me pushing forward. Because what's worse, going back to that job that I hated and I hated life, or kind of getting up in the morning, doing some stuff that maybe is not the most exciting thing in the world, but it needs to get done. But that's moving me forward in my goal. So there's that. The other thing is more of like a personal thing. So as I've got older, I've kind of, this is going to sound really bad, but I value my parents more than I ever did. Because I think like when you're younger, you kind of, they're there, they're your parents. They kind of look after you. They maybe sort of moan about them every now and again, but they've done so much for me over the course of my life. And especially when I was making that transition, they were super, super supportive of the whole process. And to have them in my corner was really, really important to me. So for me, I want to get to a point where my parents don't have to want for anything in their retirement. I mean, they're already retired, so I'm already a little bit behind the game. So I want them to, like, you know, have everything that they need, not to worry about any finances, anything like that. And they can just, you know, live comfortably. So that's kind of, I guess, the two things that really drive me on like a personal level. And then I've always been someone with, regardless of what I'm doing, is I did one of these, you know, you get like the Myers-Briggs personality tests and things like that. I did one, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's called Strength Finder 2.0. And it came out with a lot of different character traits for me, one of which was something called maximizer, which is basically you always get to a level, but you always want something more. So for example, if it's good, you want great. If it's great, you want amazing. And that's kind of, again, another thing that drives me, is that I want my business to do great things. I don't want it to be just another PT business in the mix of everything else. Nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do, but I want to keep progressing so that it leaves something like some sort of stamp on the fitness industry to say, you know, that was what that guy did and it's different to everybody else and it's a little bit more. So I guess those are the sort of the personal and the professional things that get me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, well, I guess it's that idea. People like to use the term legacy, don't they? Like that if I ever leave this world, I have some form of legacy that I left on the industry that I was in, and I was able to impact, you know, hundreds, thousands, ideally, hopefully as many people as possible, right? Kind of interesting point you touched on at the beginning there. I thought I would circle back to it was this idea is people are very good at often, when it comes to analyzing decisions, they're very good at looking at, well, if I take this action, this could happen. For example, I might stand to lose this or gain this. But often a question people will ask themselves is, well, if I make that action, what do I stand to lose if I don't take that action? I think a lot of people don't often ask that question. And like you alluded to, for you, it was, well, if I don't make the switch now, actually what I lose out on is ever knowing whether I had that chance or opportunity to kind of design a life that I want to lead and build something that I'm proud of, that's mine. And I think if a lot of people looked at decision making, both from the what you stand to lose and gain by taking the decision, but also looking what you stand to gain and lose by not making the decision, I think it brings a very rounded way of kind of looking at, how you want to live your life and the decisions you want to make. So I thought that was a very, it was a cool thing that you said at the beginning. I think people could really take that to heart as well.
Yeah, I think there's an important, I guess not necessarily just in business and stuff like that, but just generally as well, understanding all of the different ramifications of a decision are quite important, and making sort of like a rational approach to it makes sense. And like you say, is what happens if I don't, will I be happy with X, Y, Z result? If I don't do this, will I be happy sat in this job for another 30 years? No, I won't. And I think that, you get to that point where a lot of people are, even like in a weight loss context, people want to make a transition. Sometimes like motivation to change isn't actually the issue. It's almost like, well, we're kind of like ambivalent to the whole process, in the sense that sometimes it's, I want it, but the effort to get there, a bit too much, maybe, or perceived to be a bit too much. So therefore, being where I am, even though I'm not happy, it's more comfortable. And you kind of, sometimes in my situation, it was, well, now the pain of staying is worse than the potential pain of jumping ship. And it was kind of that, like, that transition in my mind to say, well, staying is now worse than whatever may happen, good, bad, or indifferent in the future. Staying where I am right now is the worst case scenario. And then it just makes that decision, as hard as it actually is, it makes that decision a hell of a lot easier, just to say, well, where I am now, that's rubbish. I don't want that. So let's see what happens in the future. And like you say, it's one of those things where if you don't do it and you have the opportunity to do it and you choose not to, you maybe always question, okay, well, why? What could have happened? And, I wonder if life would have been different, and stuff like that. So.
Old chestnut. It's funny because I always say this to people as well, though, and this is what people often don't realize, is that, where we are in life right now is very much a consequence of the action or inaction that we didn't take. And a lot of people put so much focus on the actions, but the thing I think people need to remember is, when you choose not to make an action or take an action, that's also a choice as well. Taking an action is also a choice. So
it's like so I think like not taking an action is like a conscious as acceptance of where you are right now. So you're consciously saying, I'm happy because I'm, wouldn't I say happy, but you're consciously accepting the current situation you have by not taking an action. And that can be perfectly fine. It might be the right decision to make, but you've just got to be conscious that any decision you do or don't make, you are choosing a path to go down. And is that the one that you actually want to end up going down, I guess, is the key question.
Exactly. Speaking of questions, let's take this on to something a bit more specific to you at the moment. And finally, given that you're my first guest on the Better Body Radio podcast, and so thinking about where you started and where you are now, the podcast has become a huge success. I mean, if you can give the listener just a little bit of insight how you went from a podcast, podcast episode number 1, like almost where we are right now, and kind of got it to this point where it's almost at like, 1 million downloads. Like, just kind of give the people listening a bit of insight. What's been the path from the episode number 1 to now?
Sure. Good question. So it started back in March 2017. I think that's roughly speaking around when it first started. And 64 people downloaded episode 1. And so over the course of a month, I think like 200 people downloaded it. It was terrible. So if you have the misfortune of going checking out episode number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, don't judge me on that one. Listen to the later ones. But it was a case of one of those things of, I basically started it because I wanted to have a vehicle to get my thoughts out of what I think about health, nutrition, fitness, and stuff like that I wanted that to be the vehicle for that. And it was an interesting one. Like Gary Vee's personal trainer, a guy at the time called Mike Vacanti, he was doing video blogs on a daily basis. And one of the things he said is that he was trying to encourage people to do podcasting. And he set a challenge to say, if you commit to doing 50 podcasts, I'll be your first guest. So I thought, that's quite interesting. Maybe that's like a kick up the butt that I need to actually get started with this thing. But then I kind of flipped it around and said, well, why don't I do 49 and I'll have him as the 50th? And then that's kind of like my commitment to doing that. In the end, he came on to episode like 111, but it never materialized that way. But so I started out there. I was very, very nervous, just like talking into a microphone and all that sort of stuff was kind of weird, kind of alien to me. But I was in the initial stages not as consistent as I am now. It was kind of like once every couple of weeks, maybe once a month, maybe went through a bit of a lull of, okay, this doesn't feel like it's getting anywhere. Then I decided to, okay, right, we need to, like you would with like a weight loss client or something like that, is that the consistency of showing up is what gets the results in the end. So, right, okay, if I'm going to do this, let's do it properly. So I started doing one a week. And then what happened was I was trying in the initial stages to, I think, impress other coaches. So I wanted to be all scientific and talk about research and all this sort of stuff. And it wasn't really me. I mean, I do talk about evidence-based stuff, but not necessarily delving into research in a real detailed way. And I felt that I was making podcasts for not people who I wanted to connect with and engage with, but for my peers. And what I then decided to do is just start being myself and just do podcasts that had Star Wars references in them, had a little bit of swearing in there, well, sometimes a lot, all different other sorts of things. And when I talked about evidence-based stuff, it was with a mindset of, I want to be like this translator, is kind of how I describe it, is that you've got people like Martin McDonald, your James Kriegers, Lane Norton, who look at research in a detailed level and kind of sometimes talk at a very high level of like knowledge, whereas the average person on the street can't necessarily take that and put that into practical application. It's a bit of a leap. So what I thought was, well, my position in the industry, as I see it, is the mediator between the two. So I'm the guy who takes that information from these guys and is able to translate it into a practical, implementable thing for the average person. So that was the sea change of where the podcast started to go down a different road. And I always looked at like Joe Rogan podcasts and things like that, where he would talk with a guy for over an hour and a half and it would be forever. And I was like, well, people just want the answer. I came on to find out, how do I do X? Okay, right, give me the answer in the shortest possible time frame. So that's how the show kind of morphed. And then at the back end of 2018, there was like a jump. When I started to do that, a jump in downloads. And then in 2019, that's when it just started to really take off. And 2019 was in itself 500,000 plus downloads, and getting guests on and things like that. Obviously, that helps to elevate things a bit further if you're getting some cool guests on that people know and they kind of circulate it within their networks and things like that. And so it kind of snowballed from there, and it turned into a daily podcast. And then again, like just that snowball effect of things coming through, it just seemed to hit a vein of what people wanted to hear. So if I get like DMs about podcasts now, usually it's about, I love how it's like straight to the point, it's short, it's like giving me information, it's credible, it's funny, it's entertaining. So all of the things that I was trying to do seems to have translated well. And I guess that's been one of the key factors for the growth. And then it's just from there become its own like beast that causes me to think about, how am I going to produce 7 podcasts a week every week? So that's become the challenge more than anything else, is thinking of interesting content every day.
So this is not a question I've prepared actually, and I'm very intrigued to hear the answer to this. Is what's the weirdest request or question you've had to the podcast?
Weirdest question. So I've done some weird questions. So I didn't used to do this little bit of a funny podcast called, it was Questions from Quora, which if everyone doesn't know what Quora is an app where just random people from all over the world ask random questions about anything. So I went on there and just looked at the fitness ones, and there's so many crazy questions from people, like stuff like, can I just eat cucumber and lose weight? And it's just like, okay, it's an interesting question. And then, so I started to do little series of just taking these funny questions and then answering them in that way. So I just came up with some really, really weird podcasts with that. There was one guy who, the question was something quite legit about, is whey protein good for weight loss or something like that? And this guy came on in the comments and said, whey protein is a carbohydrate. And he just went in this whole diatribe about how whey protein was a carbohydrate. And I was like, are you sure? It's like in the title, it says protein. I'm pretty sure when you look at the back, it's got like trace levels of carbohydrate. So it's like, I just took stuff like that and made like weird podcasts out of stuff like that. So they're like some of the most entertaining ones.
God, it's almost like, is your next podcast going to be on, is keto, vegan, intermittent fasting the best diet? Who knows?
Indeed. It probably is a question. I've just clicked over to, I've done like 530 episodes now, something like that. And when I was thinking about what to do for episode 500, someone suggested that I bring that whole questions from Quora thing back and do like a comedy one. So maybe I'll do that for episode 550. I don't know. So yeah, they're usually like the entertaining ones. And in terms of like other, like maybe more serious, like weird questions, because on my social media and stuff like that, I talk openly about like my personal life and the things I like and dislike. I get lots of questions about my dating life and what's going on Tinder and all those sorts of dating apps and stuff like that. So you get some random non-fitness questions like that, which I do open myself up for when I say you can ask me anything, and then they do literally ask you anything. So they're some of the weird ones.
Be careful what you wish for, as they say.
Indeed.
So moving on from the podcast, another almost content / event related question. Obviously, recently you held the COVID-19 event, and I can attest to the fact that it was a brilliant event. Luckily, you invited me on to speak on it, and I ended up speaking on an additional talk, more than I actually expected. Just hung in the last minute. In terms of just this whole idea, this whole concept coming into fruition, where did the whole brainchild of this whole event start? Like, what was the real catalyst for it?
Yeah, so I guess for people that maybe not aware, the whole COVID-19 thing was a weekend of talks, roundtable discussions, Q&As with coaches and I guess well-known fitnessy people. So people like Jamie Alderton, Gabrielle Fundaro, Dan Meredith. We had muscle mentors, loads of different people, really kind of experts in their field, plus a whole host of coaches that maybe people hadn't really heard of. Now, it was like, 25 hours worth of actual content over the course of 2 days, which in hindsight, hosting something for 13 hours a day is not as easy as it sounds. But in terms of the actual event, so obviously we're in this situation with quarantine and stuff like that, COVID-19, and it kind of like, it came from the idea that I know a bunch of coaches who are affected by this whole thing, whether they've got in-person businesses that have had a big dent in their, what they're able to do because the gyms are shut, plus people who are online. Maybe there was a couple of people who had actually transitioned to being all online. Everything was new. And it was all sort of lots of people who I knew had been directly affected by this. So I thought, well, okay, let's try and help these people out. The other side of it was there's a whole swathe of people who were bored at home with quarantine, kind of going out of their minds and so on and so forth. So the idea came from, okay, how can we bring the two together? So I thought, well, I've got this reach of a podcast, which could help a lot of people. And then it was kind of, okay, can we do like just a bunch of podcasts, one after the other, but do them live? That was kind of the idea. So then I said, well, okay, well, it would give the opportunity for these coaches to get a little bit of a platform, to get their name out there, to show people that you don't have to have 400,000 followers to give good advice and to be a good coach. You can be a great coach who just doesn't have a big social media following right now. So let's have like the opportunity to raise the profile there. Then it was a case of, well, because I've had a bunch of people on my podcast with bigger reach, can I get them to come on? That gives the event a little bit of a lift up from there. And then at the same time, we'll entertain a whole group of people who are bored at home. They can't go anywhere. So now they've got a reason that even if there was no quarantine, they'd probably want to stay home anyway, because this is some solid gold content. Plus it was free. And so that's kind of how it all came about, trying to bring these two groups of people together and using my podcast platform and a bit of reach and a bit of network to make it happen. And then it kind of went a little bit crazy in terms of how it snowballed into something. I think I spoke about a couple of times on my own like social media that I expected maybe 100 to 150 people to rock up. On day one of 24 hours, like 350 people had signed up on day one. And then 5 days later, we were at close to 2,000. So it was kind of like a big beast that kind of developed, but all for good reasons.
I have a habit of developing these beasts, the podcast. Ivan Mitchell, the beast maker.
The beast maker. Maybe it's like, it's one of those things that I actually should figure out what is it that I'm doing and then just say, I just keep doing that, then I'll just do freaking well. It's just kind of these ideas that pop into your head. And I think maybe it's like on a different kind of note is that a lot of people, I'm not saying say coaches, but I think a lot of different industries as well, is that people chase money and therefore maybe that leads them down the wrong path of things that are actually going to help them progress and grow and stuff like that. Whereas my podcast came from, I want to just provide this entertaining thing for people that they're going to enjoy. And then that snowballed into what it is. The COVID thing was, okay, well, these people are bored at home. I want to help out some coaches that I really like. So let's bring the two together. And then that snowballed. So none of it was ever done with, you know what, if I did this, then I could grab a bunch of email addresses, or I could start pitching to these people, and then I could, start selling coaching. That sort of thought process was never there. And I think that if you come into these things with the thought process of you want to help, or you're trying to do something that adds value, then the secondary or tertiary thing that comes along potentially is some sort of growth to your business, be it financial or following or otherwise.
Yeah, it's funny though, because I think back to when I first got into the fitness industry. A lot of people don't know this. My university degree was accounting and finance.
Okay.
Definitely as boring as it sounds, it was not exciting at all. And when I transitioned into the fitness industry after 2 very frustrating years of doing jobs that I just hated and did not want to do, a lot of people have been asked, like, why the hell did you not just do accounting? So much more money in that. And the thing I always point back to is exactly what you just said. It's like, listen, I could easily be doing a job that I absolutely hate just to make bank, but that gives me no fulfillment whatsoever. The way I see it is, if I show up every day, giving as much value as I can and trying to develop myself both personally and professionally every single day and week, any form of notoriety, like you said, or financial gain that comes from that will come as a natural byproduct of just helping and servicing more people. And so I think, like you said, if any coaches who listen to this podcast could take anything away from that whole segment we just talked about, it would just be, be authentic and show up with the intention of giving value. And I would say it's probably fair to say, Simon, you've done that pretty damn consistently for the last few years.
Yeah, I think that so the sort of the bit goes along with that. I think that sometimes people go too far that way, and there's never, you should never be ashamed or fearful of making money, because at the end of the day is you've got to put protein shakes on the table and be able to put a roof over your head, and that takes money. So I think that if you're doing things because you want to add value and you're doing that. That's why you're showing up consistently, to add value. And you then have a product or a service or both that really does genuinely help someone and helps them transform their life, if that's what you do, then there's nothing wrong with making money from that, because you've given that person a huge amount of value. I think the issue with, the money side of things is if you're like just selling products you don't believe in just because you want to make a quick buck, or discount codes on BCAA supplements just because you want to make a quick buck. So I think that there's a definite thing of your intent should come from trying to help people and trying to do good things, and do that consistently enough, and that will give you the rewards that you want in terms of the financial side of things. But also don't be frightened of selling your services, because that's what you're there for. And if you don't sell your service, which is potentially life-changing for someone else, is that somebody who has got an inferior product, who is maybe not in it for the right reasons, will sell their product, and potentially you've done your potential client a disservice by not offering them actually what they want. They want to give you money for good things. And it's the same thing like in any business or walk of life, is we're all willing to pay money for stuff that we want. So it's not like money's not a dirty thing but often in the fitness industry, I think more so than in other industries that I've been involved with, is there is this kind of reluctance to try and sell what it is you do. But so it's about getting that blend. But yeah, upfront, all that, the value, I certainly think pays off in the end.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's funny, there are quite a lot of coaches I know of and I've seen in the industry who are, they're really good and really passionate about what they do. But like you said, they really almost like do themselves a huge disservice by not being, well, at the end of the day, this is my time, it's valuable, I'm running a business. And don't get me wrong, you don't want to be that Instagram influencer who's like, use my discount code at blah, 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 every other post like that. That's not what you want to get involved in, unless that's your thing. And if you're doing that, that's cool. But I think for most coaches who just genuinely want to build a good coaching business, whether it be in person or online, it's just kind of like believing in your worth and understanding the psychology of change for a lot of clients as well, is that they've got to make an investment. But the more, I think, it's like yourself, like often when you provide something for free, the amount of buy-in you get to the process is often a lot less. And if someone physically commits some financial element to that change or that coaching process, because they're like, well, I've invested time, I've invested effort, I've invested money that I've worked hard for. So it's, it's well within our remit to be asking for what we're worth. And that's actually doing you a service, because if you charge, especially whatever your value is, you're going to attract more of the right type of client as well, I think.
And I think like when you think about it as well, certainly when I compare it to my corporate life, I didn't spend a penny on my training and education in that job. I went on the odd training course that the company paid for. I didn't put a penny into my own development. But fitness industry, completely different. There's so much investment you make in, we've both done MNU and various different training courses on top of that, RTS, whatever it is you're constantly kind of investing in things, but business coaches, stuff like that. So you're actually like leveling up all the time. And, there's a point at which that your service and your ability as a coach to get a result is increasing all the time. And I think that how I look at it is that it's less about like time spent with a client, stuff like that. It's like, how efficient are you at getting a result? No client cares, or, are you putting in 17 hours a week into my program or whatever? It's like, how fast can you get me that result? And it's a bit like, if your pipes had burst at home and you needed a plumber, do you care how long he spends fixing that problem? Or do you want him to come in with all of his knowledge and make a quick change that lasts as quickly as possible? It's not necessarily about this like time for money thing. And I think that the more investment you make in yourself, your business, you actually get more efficient at delivering great results. And I think that, again, like understanding that your worth as a coach increases as much as you invest, and having a belief that you can get those results and you are worth whatever it is that you charge, and believing in that is quite important. Because I think if you don't believe in your service and what you charge, no one else is going to believe in it for you. And that comes across if you're a little bit like nervous about, oh, I'm not sure if I should charge this much and this is the price, and you're kind of like fearful and wincing at the answer that's going to come back at you. That kind of comes across. I think there's a level of confidence that you have to have when you're charging for stuff.
100%. Your coach Max put it in such a good way, and I'll leave it this before moving on to the final question. Is he always says to his clients that, you know, he brings on board initially, you're not investing in, you know, the 3 hours a week or the time I spend working on your program outside of the gym. You're investing in all of that plus the last 10 years of education, effort, and development that I've put into providing you a better service. And that's all. Yeah. I still think it's all the time that's been invested up to this point by the coach goes into what they're getting today as well. Because if you were to hire that coach 5 years ago, even maybe 2 years back, the level of service you would have received wouldn't be the same as the one you're getting today. So I think that's maybe something for maybe the general population who tune into this podcast, just to keep in mind when you're hiring a coach, is that there's so much that's went into the point that you're showing up at that point in time to that coach, how they've builded and refined and kind of really tweaked and positioned their service to the point it is today. The final main question, although we're going to move on to some quick fire questions at the end. I thought it'd be a nice fun little segment to chuck in the end there just to throw you in the ring. Last question, what's next for Iron Paradise Fitness?
Someone at the door, mate.
Really? So again, while Simon's answering his door, essentially we're going to get this final question and then we're going to dive into some quick fire questions. So these are not going to be the same questions every week for every guest. I'm going to handpick 4 to 6 little quick fire questions just to throw at the guests we have on. All right, Simon. So what is next? Apart from answering your door, what's next for Iron Paradise Fitness?
Yeah, it's a delivery. So what's next for me? Obviously, we're in this sort of like transition-y period with coronavirus and stuff like that. So I think continuing to still grow my online business is my main focus right now. Continuing to grow the podcast, and one of the things that I kind of set myself for at the beginning of the year was to be content with what I have, and then everything else is a bonus on top of that. So yeah, business is good right now. So just kind of building on that is my main focus. Maybe towards the end of the year, I'm going to do something with my education platform and maybe opening that up to a broader range of people. But essentially really focusing in on the clients that I have right now and building that one-to-one coaching business is where I'm focused. Plus also the podcast as well is a big thing for me. Getting over 1 million as well would be quite cool.
That'll be a bit of a milestone, won't it? Awesome. So before we get into the quick fire questions, I just want to thank you for coming on, Simon, and just to commend you for, you know, all the work and effort that, you know, maybe people haven't quite seen behind the scenes that you've put in over the years to get to where you are now. I want to commend you for showing up so consistently and providing so many people with so much value. And I think just even based on the CoFit event, it's probably fair to say you've inspired a lot of coaches to kind of really step up their game and for them to provide more value to the general population as well. So I just thought I wanted to commend you for those things before we finish off with all all the kind of formal stuff at the end, as you do. So we're going to just fire at you some quick fire questions. Okay. Like I just explained to the guys when you were getting your package, is it's going to be that sounded just as you're picking up your package. It's 4 to 6 random questions that I've literally, when I'm ever coming on to interview a guest, I'm just thinking, what are maybe 4 to 5 just really random questions that I just want to ask and just see what the answers are. So just a bit.
Here we go.
So here we go. Top 3 books right now.
Top 3 books right now. Thank You for Arguing. Jay Heinrichs, I think this guy wrote it. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. And I'm just about to start reading Sapiens as well. So they're my current 3.
Right. Favorite meal? Of all meals, what's your favorite?
Steak and some accoutrement, but the steak itself, absolutely. A nice rare steak would be like absolute bliss.
Money. What's your most disliked food? What do you detest?
Any form of berry, so strawberry, raspberry, blackberry, anything like that. I've only ever tried half a strawberry in my life, Never tried a raspberry or anything like that. Not a fan.
Oh, upsetting the berry fans out there, and the ones that love all the berry and chia smoothies and stuff.
Nah,
Exactly. Favorite exercise?
bench press, easy. I always love it.
I'm
such a bro. it was never going to be squats. Come on.
And guy who benches, who doesn't have any pain when they bench, who doesn't like a bench press if you're a guy? Come on.
It's my favorite thing to train, favorite exercise, favorite body part, etc. So I'm such a bro, but I'm honest.
Pectorals for days. What's your hated exercise?
Squats. But then I should caveat that by saying that I did break my hip 4.5 years ago. So actually, like, squats are super painful for me. So if someone forced me to do a squat, that would be horrible. So that's my least favorite exercise. Not because I'm just against leg day, but for a very specific reason.
There you go. And who should we have next on the podcast?
Oh, that's a good question. Who should we have next on the podcast? Someone I'm trying to get on my podcast is Mr. Martin McDonald. I think he'd be very entertaining. So if you can get him, that'd be awesome. So I think like Martin McDonald's quite good. I think there's people that I'd want to get on mine. Maybe I'll kind of recommend to you. So Ben Carpenter, someone I want to get on. Guys like that would be quite cool. There you go. Or maybe Joe Rogan. Interview Joe Rogan. That would be awesome. I don't think you get Joe Rogan, but you could try.
Can you just imagine after that, you just log on to Instagram the next day and you're like, the phone's melted, can't work it anymore.
Yeah.
Cool.
You bust through 1 million in one day.
I know, right? Jesus. Cool. So I guess last but not least, where can people find you? Where's the best place to direct people to check more out about Iron Paradise Fitness?
Sure. Best place is probably Instagram. That's where I hang out the most. It's at iron_paradise_fitness. From there, you can consume content, stories, posts, all that sort of stuff. If you click the link in my bio, from there, you can go to the podcast, you can go to the website, all various different sorts of places and find out more about me. So either go to the Instagram page or go direct to ironparadisefitness.com. That's your best place.
Awesome. And I will give a little request of my own, guys. So please, if you can, go on iTunes, give us a 5-star review. If you really liked and resonated with what Simon had to say today, leave us a comment. Let us know what it is you liked most about the episodes. And log into future episodes for more guests and for the Better Body Radio team show as well. Simon, once again, thanks so much for your time, and we will for sure have you back on at a later stage. Maybe after
my friend.
Maybe after you hit that 1 million.
For sure. Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Awesome.